Acting like beauty leaders all around the world. Let us keep our dreams alive. Cause tomorrow's gonna be a better day.
Hello everyone, welcome to the Kectil Youth Network Podcast. I'm your host Nabila Abbas, and in today's episode, we delve into a critical and deeply impactful topic: gender equality and the fight against female genital mutilation (FGM) in Kenya. Joining us is a courageous young activist who will share her personal experiences, cultural insights, and the steps being taken to challenge harmful practices while redefining equality within her community. Stay with us as we explore the role of tradition, education, and advocacy in creating a more just and equitable world. So, in no time, I'm just going to my wonderful, inspiring speaker. Could you introduce yourself and share a bit about your background and the work you do as a youth advocate to our audience?
Okay, thank you so much, Nabila, for having me. My name is Bernadette Kendi Motia from Kenya. I'm a Kectil colleague 2024. And a little bit about my background is I graduated from campus back in 2023 December. I have a background in strategic management, and I'm involved with an actors organization which focuses on innovation and mentoring students to start their own businesses. I'm also a current volunteer of Sustainable Development Solutions Network, SDSN, which aims to advocate for SDGs and teach communities about sustainable development solutions, also supporting youth ideas which are focused on sustainable development. I'm also an innovator, and I'm a co-founder of an organization called Docas Africa Foundation that is focusing on agri-tech, that is reporting livestock diseases, and you engage with the vets so that they can know what the problem is. My interest, I like hiking. I like talking to young people and coming up with solutions. I also love being a youth advocate. And one of my greatest passions is sustainable development. I like seeing people develop. I like developing the community, coming up with policies that can raise the standards of a society. Thank you.
This is so great, and we are so glad to have you in this podcast episode today. And I'm sure our audience would love to hear you about very important context of both gender equality and FGM in Kenya. So we just have a very, common question to you. Of course, it has a very broader aspect as well. But in your perspective, what does gender equality mean to you, particularly within the context of your tribe and cultural background?
Thank you so much for that question. Gender equality generally means providing equal opportunities and rights to everyone, regardless of who they are or gender. But my definition is ensuring that men and women have equal opportunities, rights, and respect in all aspects of life. In my tribe, gender equality is often misunderstood. And people may view, if you advocate for gender equality, they may view you as rebellious, or rather that you are someone that is not familiar with their norms, and they might be a little bit hostile. So advocating for these rights, I think that we should respect the balance there's a balance between the respect for culture and need for change. We need to advocate for gender equality.
Yeah, that is absolutely true. What you have just mentioned, that when someone is, talking about gender equality, the more it looks like they are anti-men or maybe they are rebellious. I totally agree with that. But of course, it does not mean that, which is, of course, wrong. Like, our agenda is to create a more equitable world for both of men and women, and to create a very positive environment. I truly agree with that. So, as you have mentioned, that you are also a young community advocate as well. So I would again like to ask you that how is gender equality perceived in your tribe or community as a sum?
Okay, thank you so much for that question. So, how is gender equality perceived in my tribe or community? Being a young advocate, I often see people are not interested in advocating for gender equality, especially if it involves men who believe in stereotypes such as that they're in charge, or rather they are more of the decision makers, and they don't see how these things can affect the women in the community. So oftenly I've had some challenges, and I'm happy to report that most of the people in my community are willing to champion for gender equality. And specifically in my tribe, people have deep rooted norms that affect how women are perceived in the community. For example, I had a case that even during classes in my village, you see how young boys treat you. You see how maybe young men, adults treat you, and you can see how they degrade women who are more outspoken, or rather who teach other people about gender equality. So it's a serious issue and something that needs to keep the conversation going.
Thank you for sharing some of the examples as well. And as a sum, the definition of gender equality, that how it is perceived in your tribe and culture. So I think the more we are delving into the conversation about gender equality, the more we are getting some idea that how actually it is different in some different cultures and regions. So are there specific cultural practices or traditions in your tribe um, like that influence how gender roles are defined?
Yes, thank you so much for that question. Actually, in my tribe, there is the GBV, gender-based violence, which is widely practiced because men believe are the main decision makers. There are these stereotypes that the communities believe. One of them is that a man can beat a woman, and there's nothing that the community can do because apparently is the culture or tradition that has been practiced over the years. And these women suffer in silence. Most of them even turn to alcohol. We have the mental abuse. We have the psychological aspects of these abuses that affect these women. And another one, GBV actually is the main one. And actually the county has policies against it, but still it's an issue. It's a big issue. So apart from that, we have women leadership, of which my tribe limits women leadership. Women are not allowed to hold leadership positions. Actually, there's this case that in my county, there's a women governor who was elected a while back. And there has been so much issues because she has been impeached 3 times within a duration of 2 years. And I was thinking to myself, what could be the problem? What is she not doing that maybe other women governors are doing? And it came to my surprise that there were so many men that were saying that she's a woman. She's not supposed to be leading men. She should step down, and a man should take the position, and she will be the deputy of the man. And I was wondering to myself, okay, we are championing for gender equality, and there's this gender role which is encouraging more girls and women to apply for leadership position. And I was thinking maybe 5 to 10 years, if this is the situation right now, what about 5 to 10 years? What conversation will we be having? Because I really believe that supporting women are the backbone of the society, and supporting women can change a lot of things. So I think these traditions should be challenged. People should be educated about advocating for gender equality, especially when women are holding leadership positions. Those are the major challenges that we face in my tribe. regarding gender inequality.
Yeah, that is true. Like most of the time, like women are stigmatized that they are not meant for leadership roles, and that is actually happening in the world. And that is, of course, wrong because women are the backbone of the society, of the community, and of the country as a whole, as a nation. So their participation into socio-economic and political affair is very, very important, and that is why we should empower them and we should emphasize a very equitable and equal participation of women in such, you know, larger scale as well. So, what challenges do women in your community face when advocating for gender equality? You can even, quote some of your personal experiences because you are a young youth activist, you are a young woman, a young face in your country as well.
Okay, thank you so much for that question. So, like I said, gender inequality is something that is often misunderstood, especially where there are deep-rooted cultural norms. And one major challenge that women face in advocating for gender equality is the resistance from elders. By elders, I mean the old generation who believe that these are the traditions, these are the these are the norms that were passed from our forefathers, and it was passed years down. Right now, we are the ones passing them to you. But so these norms awfully limit women to talk about certain things. And being a young advocate, sometimes you are labeled as someone who doesn't care, someone who doesn't know tradition. So people might view you as an outcast, or rather someone who is so rebellious. You cannot even follow traditions. You're not part of us. You're not you are told so many things. And I think it's not good. Also, there are some challenges that women have when advocating. For example, if a woman wants to advocate for something and they lack education, or they have the lack of support, the backbone system, they often feel like, okay, if I go to these people and tell them this, they're going to view me as this person. So they step back a little bit to protect themselves and to protect how they will be perceived by the community, which is often stigmatization. So I had a case a while back. There was a lady, and she was not learned, or rather she was not advanced in education, and she was telling me the challenges she passes through. And I asked her what the community was doing, if she has reported to someone, or rather if she has found a confined space to talk about it to someone. And she said no, because these people will talk about me. They'll go to the village and start saying, this woman is like this, she has done this. And she was so afraid. And I told her, sometimes you just have to take the bold step. It's happening to you. How many others are out there that have the fear? How many others don't want to talk because they have the fear of how they will be perceived? And she told me she'll try. So unfortunately, we lost contact. But I really hope she had the courage to talk about it. She had the courage to say what she was experiencing. And maybe she healed. Yeah.
Wow, that is like very, devastating to hear that how young advocates, activists in the community having so much struggle and efforts to put in to speak about, gender equality. And you just have quoted the life, experience about your fellow and colleague, that how they just went back, step back of their, because of their, bad experiences. So we totally, relate with it as youth activists. So I think everyone who is listening right now as an audience, as young fellows from anywhere in the world, they can relate to this common, issues they might have been facing in their country as well. Thank you very much for your very, honest and very outspoken answers regarding gender equality. And I think gender equality is a very broader aspect, and we can spend hours and hours a while exploring the conclusion of gender equality. But of course, for my audience in our today's episode, the more emphasis is on one of the very, very sensitive issues in most of the African regions, that is female genital mutilation, which remains a significant issue in Kenya, with approximately 21% of women and girls aged 15 to 49 having undergone the practice according to UNICEF. Despite being illegal since 2011 under Kenyan's prohibition of FGM Act, it persists due to deeply rooted cultural traditions, particularly in certain ethnic communities. So we will, in the next section, we will be talking a little more about FGM with our speaker. So I would ask you, can you explain the cultural or traditional reasoning behind FGM in Kenya for the very, first speaker, first audience who are just listening to this episode so that they can have the idea?
Okay, thank you so much for that question. So FGM is often seen as a rite of passage, or rather a cultural act that is often done to young women or girls or young adults, and it involves the removal of the upper parts of a woman's body. And this FGM is a major challenge that we are currently battling. It's widely practiced, often in under closed doors, and FGM is often viewed as women, young girls who are being transformed into young women. But it's done out of ignorance because not most people realize what FGM can do to someone psychologically or physically. So if in some communities, FGM it's like a religious act. People believe it's religion. It's something that should be done. It's written in maybe the religious books. But I think this is often misunderstood. It depends on how you view. Because if you pick parts from maybe those books, you become even more confused. And if someone even now tries to mix it up with religion, with culture, you become even more confused and you view it as it's something that should be done to the young girls.
Thank you very much for, I can listen that there are some of the misconceptions about FGM as well, and you have very, very well explained that. So I'm pretty sure that most of our audience would be getting the right information about FGM. So I would ask you, what are the most common forms of FGM practiced in Kenya or maybe in the rest of some other part of Africa, and at what ages are girls most affected?
Okay, thank you so much for that question. Forms of FGM, I don't know about the forms, but there are types. There are two types, actually three, and there are some emerging ones that are being now adopted in the modern world. And these two types also depend on the communities. There are several communities practicing FGM. And one type one is it's a little bit more leaned on removing an upper part of the clitoris. And the type two is more of removing almost everything. Type one is also called the scooping. And type two is more of removing more parts, and they are then sealed. So it's actually so painful. And I think it's something that should be banned, actually. It's in as much as it's perceived as culture, I don't think that I would even like to experience what this woman faced during CAT. And the most affected age group is between, some communities even practice it below the age of 10, girls who are below the age of 10. But most of them is between 12 years to 17 years. Yes.
Oh my God, this is really horrible to even hear. And I can imagine that how these young girls are going through such. hard time a while in the name of like maybe culture, region, whatsoever. But of course, no culture, region um, should promote such kind of activities which are actually violent in another word. And we don't even understand like why FGM is being done and what message they want to convey. Would you just put some basic concept on that for our audience clarity?
Sorry. Pardon, please.
So I was just asking, like, can you shed some light on this? That why actually process of FGM is being done with young girls? What message they want to convey while doing these practices? Some basic idea for our audience to get a better clarity.
Okay. All right. So FGM is done as a rite of passage from a girl to a man. And if they perceive it as if you have not undergone FGM, you are viewed as an outcast. Or rather, they view it as they do it so that they maintain a girl's virginity. That's how they perceive it. And for those that are done below the age of 7 or 10 years, these are very young girls who do not know even what FGM is, and they have nowhere to go. And for these communities, it's a must you undergo the FGM. Although I'm happy to report that cases are going down, the number of cases reported in FGM are decreasing. And sometimes they think that if you have not gone, you have not done the FGM, you might not get married. Actually, you not get married, or rather, you not get a husband. And this, I think, traumatizes young girls because maybe you have a dream of getting a family, you have a dream, getting children, being a mother, and you're told that, you know what, if you don't go through this, you not get a husband. You just remain here, and people will view you as someone who doesn't value tradition, and you'll be told to step aside. So you'll be stigmatized. Yeah. So they do it out of, sometimes I feel like they do it because they want to be part of a society. They want to be viewed as, uh, they want to be viewed as part of the community, because even women advocate for these things, and they say, you know what, I did it, my grandmother did it, my great grandma, why not you? Yeah. So that fear, that stigmatization, and the pressure from the society is what makes most girls undergo FGM.
Wow, that is really, very devastating to hear. And of course, like as you have just mentioned, that it is a community pressure, it is a societal pressure, and maybe she can be abandoned, or maybe she can be isolated if she does not go through that process. That is maybe called as an heritage process. Maybe their grandfathers, forefathers have done this, and that is why she should also be doing this. So yeah, we can totally understand that how much societal pressure it has, and how much the girl and a woman wants to start their normal life because they want to start a family. You just raise a very keen point between the conversation. So what impact does FGM have on the physical and psychological well-being of women and girls in your community?
Okay, thank you so much for the question. I often view FGM as a grave violation of the women's rights, and FGM has lifelong implications. One of those implications is the long-term one is the birth complication. Most women who have undergone FGM have complications during birth, and it often leads to fistula. Fistula, how do I describe it? Fistula is one is unable to control what comes out of the body. Yeah. And this can be so devastating. because you have to depend on people. And if you have a newborn, there's someone also depending on you. So I think fistula being one of the most of something that has been happening is one of the long-term impacts. Then you have prolonged labor. When now you have been sworn, there's prolonged labor, and if it's not handled carefully, there's risk of death for both the mother and the child. So these processes, some of them even die because of the prolonged labor, which is very sad. Then you have it robs girls of their childhood, because now a girl who is 10 years, very young, and they have undergone FGM, maybe they don't understand what this is. And maybe 7 years, 10 years later, you now have the reality of what happened. It's psychological trauma. It causes mental issues. Yeah. And these people often resort to physical harm, or they become so depressed, and often may end up in suicide, especially if it's done anonymously. You are not aware of what was being done.
That is totally, we can say in another words, that it is a practice of physical violence to a woman, to a young girl. And obvious it is, because we cannot, in any words, we cannot support it, we cannot promote it, we cannot encourage it. So I'm very much sure that our audience would also have this clarity about FGM and all the misconception, if they might have, about FGM, and how actually painful it is for any young girl or woman in the world. So that is totally horrible, totally horrible. So I just want to note that how has FGM affected education and opportunity for girls in a broader aspect? How would you comment that?
Okay, one thing I believe is that FGM is done because of ignorance. People do not know the implications of having this done to maybe your daughter, your sister, or someone close to you. So, how has FGM affected education and opportunities for girls? One thing I know is that the stigma. When you go to a school and you have undergone FGM, and the other girls maybe are from different places, and they see that maybe, or you tell them that maybe you have undergone, there's that stigma. They feel like you don't fit in. You feel like you don't fit in that situation. And sometimes it can lead even to dropping out of school. But I'm happy that most young girls are actually admitted in school. There's the community mobilization for education. So it's mandatory for every young girl to be in school, or young girls under the age of 17 years. So, and these girls that have undergone FGM, they are coming out and talking about it. And the stigma is going down, I would say, because they have actually realized, and they tell even their success stories, that maybe I've undergone this, and this is what happened to me. And right now, maybe I have an undergraduate, I've done my advanced master's, maybe PhD. Yeah, so it's progressing. It's progressive. Young girls are being mentored to have these opportunities, to go for these opportunities, and to have education.
Yeah, that is true. Like, the right awareness and the right education is very important to combat this issue as a community, as a society. And you have mentioned, like, many young girls are now raising the voice against FGM, even though they have undergone this process, but now they are coming out of their space. And they're talking about it. That is wonderful, and that is wonderful to hear as well. And more power to them, and you as well as an activist. So, do their school even support the right awareness about FGM? Like, how does this awareness works in different schools?
Okay, thank you for that question. So we have youth advocates, we have youth activists that champion for anti-FGM. And how it happens in school is that we have we have programs. There are programs that are held in schools where we can have a speaker who comes to talk to them about these things, how they should react, how if it's ongoing, who to turn to, who to talk to, and how to approach the subject. And for the girls, maybe between 12 to 17 years, because they are they are young adults actually. So these girls, they have camps during the holidays. And these camps, they are taught about so many things. That includes confidence boosting, mental health, we have menstrual hygiene, a variety of topics. And I'm happy to report that most people are turning out. At first, it was a bit, people are not sure. But recently, it's become more aware, far more aware of these things and participate. Yes.
It's great to know that there are some of the young groups that are working on FGM. They're working against of FGM. So it is about like how local activists and young people are working against FGM. Are there any legal frameworks in Kenya aimed at combating FGM? How effective have they been?
Yes, actually, there are legal frameworks that advocate for anti-FGM. One was came into effect on 4th of October 2011, and it criminalizes all forms of a human being. But there are still challenges in the implementation side and enforcement, because when you go to people who are supposed to be advocating for these things, you might go and report to someone and they view it as a cultural issue. Instead of reporting it to a higher authority, they say, "Oh, okay, so this is cultural. Let's sort it outside, outside the bracket." And that is how they deal with it. It just disappears. So I think the government should involve more people in anti-FGM measures. They should ensure everyone that is involved in this FGM practice should be caught. Actually, should be jailed. So, in the side of implementing, rules are there, policies are there, measures are there, but implementation is still reluctant. There is very slow progress. Actually, there is a word of FGM, but I think that people will be how done instead of FGM, maybe alternative rites of passage.
It is very much needed, of course, on a national level as well. So we are just moving to our another section that is about activism and solutions about FGM. So what strategies are being used to raise awareness about the dangers of FGM in Kenya, even though they might have gone through FGM themselves, but still they are now getting out of their shells and they're talking about it. And that is wonderful. More power to them, as well as you as a youth activist. And of course, you have just mentioned that why on a broader level, at national level, some of the government policies should be very strong and they should be long lasting in the community, in the society, so that people should have this fear that FGM is not a legal thing to do in any part of the world or even in some of the regions of Africa where it is prevailing. That is true that government level action is very much needed. So we are just moving down to our another section, which is all about activism and solutions. I would just need your very brief and quick response to these questions. What strategies are being used to raise awareness about the dangers of FGM in Kenya?
Okay, thank you so much for that question. Some of the strategies used to raise awareness are one that is widely used is the community workshops, where we have a meeting. Maybe the one in charge of the community calls a meeting, can be either women only or men only, and they talk about these issues to do with FGM, how they affect our girls in the society. Even they can be taught about, they can even see, we have visual displays of how this impacts these young girls. And we also have radio programs where a speaker can be invited into a radio program, mostly in vernacular for those who don't know English or Swahili, that is mostly spoken here. And they can talk in vernacular and they can reason with these people, and maybe they can be able to reach to those who maybe are still holding into this harmful practice. Then we have sensitization and education programs, which is mostly done in schools. And young girls or young men, boys, are taught about the effects of FGM, how it affects, how they can advocate or rather shun away from it. Yes, these are the most working ones at the moment.
That is great. And you pointed out and mentioned a very good example. I can quote and highlight it again, that about radio invitation, that how they support the native or maybe local language so that they can speak and convey their message to the rest of the world. I think that is a good strategy as well for activism. And can you share any success stories of communities that have abandoned FGM practices?
Actually, yes, because one of the communities was the Maasai community, and it was a known fact that the Maasai community does FGM. It was something that was very open because they even held ceremonies after this girl undergone the cut. And since the initiation of the policy or the act, the 2011 FGM Act, these cases have gone down. They have subsidies. And in 2022, we had around 15%. No, in 2014, we had 22% of these cases are being reported. Looking back, we had 38%, but right now it's at 9%, meaning there's still a long way to go, but also there's progress. Most people are saying no to FGM.
That is great. After having a very devastating and horrible conversation, I'm happy that at least we are also hearing some of the good news and some of the good impacts as well, that majority people are calling out against of FGM and they are coming out of their shells and they are speaking about it. That is wonderful. So, because you are also a youth advocate, so this is a very straightforward question. How do you approach educating and engaging with elders or traditional leaders about this issue?
Okay, thank you so much for that question. So how do I advocate? One is through talking to young people in schools, young girls especially, where you can have a session in the afternoon and you resonate with them. They tell you the issues they are facing and how this FGM is being carried out, or rather how they see it in their communities. And it's usually a very safe space. And they will open up to you. They will tell you this is what happens. This is how they talk about it. Yes. And we have also camps where young adults are called, maybe between the age of 17 to 20, and they are taught the effects of these things. They are told how it affects you mentally, psychologically, or physically. And so many girls, maybe they don't know what it does to them. They just answer, they say, you know what, yes, I'll do it. So most of them say no. Most of them actually are more aware of what FGM does. Another thing is the youth spaces, where you can talk to other activists or talk to other people about FGM and how it affects girls, these young girls. And maybe these young people, you talk to them, they will go and advocate in their areas or in their communities. So it's like mentorship, or I don't know how to put it. Maybe it's like advocating for other advocators. You tell them there's this thing that is going on. This is how it affects people. What are you doing in your communities about it? And they will go and talk to girls in their communities, will advocate for more girls in their communities. Yes, that way.
That is great. That is great. And while we in few of the sections, as our audience is sticking to our this episode, we have just talked about the gender equality context, and we have also talked about some of the basic concept of FGM, that what actually it is, and how sometimes there are some misconceptions as well stigmatized to FGM, that maybe it looks like that way or this way. And then we also talk about that what types of FGM are being, practiced in some of the regions in Africa and in Kenya as well. And in conclusion, we have just got this point, like we cannot support FGM at all. In another word, FGM relates to physical violence with young girl and women. And that is, of course, totally, totally wrong. So while we are talking about gender equality, we are talking about FGM. Now, this is a very important section of this podcast, that is role of men in gender equality and ending FGM. I would remind to our audience that even Kectil is a strong advocate of inclusively including men into different campaigns, and they inclusively invite men to any campaigns and advocacy they are aiming for. For example, you can go to the Kectil website, where they have just launched the Male as a Promise Keeper campaign. And for the past 2 years, Kectil is strongly working on this campaign, and they have been getting very good results. So you can also go to Kectil website and you can sign that petition, Male as Promise Keeper. So we would truly appreciate your this contribution. If you are a very responsible male in your society and you want to be, you still have this time. So what is the role of men in supporting gender equality in your community in a broader aspect? How would you comment on this?
Thank you so much for that question. Male engagement is very important in the community. And I've seen that there are certain organizations or groups that are focusing on involving men in conversation to do with gender equality, and you have GBV and FGM. So what role does the men advocates, what role does men advocate in gender equality in my community? So one, I would like to say that men can act as influencers. Actually, men actually are the biggest influencers you can have in this space, because if a man comes out and talks about what they have experienced, there's this stereotype that limits men to talk about what they face, especially if it is gender-based violence, because they have been maybe taught that a man should not talk about his feelings, or a man should not show emotion, and they struggle so much psychologically, and someone cannot even ask for help. So men can be influencers, especially if they hold positions in families or communities and even the workplace, because they can come out and speak about it, or they can even form a small movement, a small group, which is a safe space, and they talk about these things that happen and affect other men, and also advocate for men who cannot speak, who are rather more inclined to holding their feelings or are feared to be seen as weak. So also men can challenge these harmful norms, especially the FGM. they can talk to maybe their, okay, here in Africa, we are very protective of our culture. And these traditions is maybe what holds communities together. So if a man talks to elders about a certain thing, he's more likely to be listened than a woman. So if these men go there to the grassroots level and talk to these people who are still holding these norms, it's going to help a lot than a woman advocating for these norms. So these men can challenge harmful norms. They can also advocate for change. They can be role models, and they can be mentors for those experiencing the same issues they have undergone in their lives.
Yeah, that is truly well said, that men can be the great influencers if they want to advocate, and if they want to become part of this, they can be a great, inspiration and influencers themselves. And that's true. So, but how we can, invite men to be our allies in the fight against FGM? And also, have you seen any male-led initiatives or advocates working to end FGM in Kenya?
Thank you so much for that question. So how men can be allies is through educating other men. So there are still men who are deep-rooted in the culture, and they believe certain things should be in a certain way, regardless of how the world is changing right now. So men can act as mentors, or rather educate these men who are still in these norms, or rather believe that these norms should be held, especially if they are harmful. So they can speak against it. They can teach people that instead of practicing FGM, how about we change this passage of like, traditions. Traditions is something that people have made. It's something that our society has made. Yeah, you sit and you say this is how it is going to happen. Those are traditions. But I believe we can change this tradition, because I wouldn't want maybe my daughter or my future granddaughter to face this thing. And if I change the perception now, it will become the new tradition. And I believe if my daughter meets that tradition, they will not perform it, and generation. So it has to end with this generation, so that we can progress with a new generation with new traditions and new norms. So if men can advocate for FGM, I believe that the society can change, because men actually are believed to make the rules. They're main decision makers. They can act as mentors for those who are unwilling to change. They can act as role models, and they can even give success stories, or rather bring people who have experienced this thing to share their stories of resilience. So if there are some initiatives, male-led initiatives, actually several, that advocate for FGM. We also have individuals who speak against FGM, and one of these initiatives is an organization called Men and FGM. I think it's one of the oldest organizations that involves men in the discussion. We also have Pastoralist Child Foundation. It speaks against FGM. So we also have recently there's an organization that has been formed called Stop FGM Now, and it's going to advocate for FGM and the girl child in the country. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for highly mentioning these organizations and these campaigns, either lead by men or women. So thank you very much for this information as well. I hope our listeners can get benefit of this, and they can go check these organizations if they want to become part of it. And while we are discussing that how men can become allies, for our Kectil audience as well, I would ask you, like, how can our listeners from outside maybe Kenya support efforts to achieve gender equality and end FGM? How they can become part of it? Thank you very much for highly mentioning the organization, some of the new organizations as well, especially led by the men, and they are taking step against FGM. Of course, this will be very beneficial for our listeners to learn about these organizations. But how can our listeners from outside Kenya support efforts to achieve gender equality and end FGM? How they can become part of it?
Okay, thank you so much for that question. So, supporting initiatives that advocate for these norms or traditions can be a very good way to support, because I believe that lack of support system, or rather lack of resources, it's something that challenges most activists or young people. There are not enough resources. So if actually most organizations that run these programs are NGOs, and sometimes if you are a young person and maybe you're not associated with any NGO, and you have maybe a support group that is not maybe well equipped to handle, you might lag back a little bit. So supporting these organizations or initiatives is one way that the community or listeners from outside Kenya can support efforts to achieve gender equality. Another one is speaking up. Speaking up. Maybe someone has entrusted you and opened up to you. Speaking up against these practices, and also it can be through social media. It can be through maybe vocal. You use your voice and talk about it in forums. It can be a good way to advocate or champion for gender equality, any form of gender inequality. So yeah, I believe that if we are united and talk about these things, we can attain a good future for our young sisters or young girls or our future even daughters.
Yeah, that is true. Like speaking up about something is very important. Unless we are not speaking about that certain issue, we are not able to convey our message to the rest of the world. So, thank you very much for this advice to our listeners. So, I also encourage them that they should follow this advice and they should speak more about FGM, and they should, they can even start a very local community campaign in their country, maybe, or maybe in the favor of us, of their fellows from Africa, and to raise awareness about this issue at international level altogether. That would be a wonderful idea. So, thank you very much for your very honest reviews and some of the straightforward advices to our listeners. So, while we are just, jumping towards our final section, I would ask you, like, what is your vision for the future regarding gender equality and the eradication of FGM in Kenya?
Thank you so much. My vision of the future regarding gender inequality is that in the coming years, we can proudly stand and speak that we cap this gender inequality thing. So that is, we can proudly say that we championed for gender equality, and we can see it now. This is what was happening, and this is what is happening right now. And in that moment, I think as an advocate, I will be so satisfied to think that I made the life of this young girl a little better than it was before. Even if maybe someone is maybe 40 years or 3 years, regardless of age, I would have known that I championed for the right of this young girl. And attaining the 2030 agenda is something that Kenya is hoping for in regards to gender inequality, where we'll have women and men have equal opportunities, STEM opportunities, we have women in leadership. And at that point in time, we see more women are having these leadership positions, and they are being not shunned out, or they're being told that you are a woman, you cannot lead, you should step out. So I think that is my vision, where men and women have equal rights. And this gender inequality or GBV, we have femicide, all these forms of gender inequality will no longer be there. Yeah, I think that is what would make me happy in the near future.
Yeah, that is really wonderful and beautiful to imagine a world where both men and women have a very equitable and equal environment. And that should be our future goal as well. So, thank you very much for all your honest answers, your straightforward advices, and shedding a light on one of the very, very important issue, that is FGM. I hope this information would be very crucial for our audience to listen, and they will gain a lot of information as well as the idea that how they can run campaign in their capacity to start a global activism altogether, as we all as a young fellows from across the world are a strength, and we can create a positive environment if we work as a team. So we truly appreciate our all listeners that you should raise voice against FGM. And again, for our speakers, you are really inspiring, you are really extraordinary, and we more power to your community work, what you have been doing and what you are pursuing in the future as well. Our support is with you, and we really adore you for that and for your courage as well. So, is there any final message you would like to share with the audience?
Thank you so much for having me today. It's been I'm really happy that I spoke about this. My final message to the audience would be to advocate for what they believe in. If you believe in, maybe, let's say, gender equality or poverty or innovation, maybe bringing up young people, empowering women, advocate for that. Take the bold step and talk about it, involve more people. And I'm sure that at the end of the day, there will be success. There will be challenges along the way, but eventually there will be a success story. Yes, thank you.
That is very beautiful. Thank you very much once again. As we conclude this powerful episode, we are reminded of the resilience and courage of those fighting for gender equality and the eradication of FGM. The stories and insights shared today shed light on the challenges but also the hope for a future where every girl and woman can live with dignity and freedom. Let us all play our part in amplifying these voices and driving change. Thank you for joining us, and until next time, this is your host signing off with a call to action. Let us stand together for equality and justice. Stay inspired and see you in the next episode.